right, here we go. Whoop, I'm sorry. They're not nice. You don't have to worry about the surround being soft step onto the base plate on the concrete.
Am I good?
Pen's good.
1, 2, 3. So listen, I mean, first off, it's important to take care of business. We have the assurances of Frank that he's currently making everybody a slice of chicken parm to make sure that you're leaving here. There's no way for us to be able to go through the rest of our time together without just getting that out of the way. It didn't feel fair. I was just inside with some of you, and they gave me a slice of chicken parm, and then I saw all of you fine members of the media watching me eat it, and there's only one way to make this right. You know, we all have memories of this community, of Paisan's Pizza. So I went to college and law school here in Albany. I spent my first 2 years on campus at SUNY Albany, and then about 3 years on South Main, just a couple blocks away. And during those 3 years, we would often be spending a whole lot of time here in the Pine Hills community, coming to Paisan's. Even afterwards, I was assigned for 6 years in the Army Reserve, split between Albany and Schenectady, and 4 years in the State Senate. And even coming back through the years, you find the opportunity to come here to Paisan's, and even speaking to a bunch of you, you all have your own life memories here. This is your community. And we were just upstairs with Frank telling an amazing story of his family. His parents raised him and 2 siblings plus a cousin in a small one-bedroom home just above Paisan's. And we just visited this space. It's even smaller than you might imagine. And this was a first-generation immigrant experience, struggling to make ends meet. It builds character. To have to grow up in that kind of a setting, you have to work hard for success. Success isn't just handed to you. And many people have come to this state, they've come to this country. Oftentimes they'll tell a story about how they had no money in their pocket, and they worked hard. Through success here, they were able to build up a small business. Paisan's has been in business now here for 30 years, and they've withstood the test of time. They've been through many years where even though a lot of people might move to this area and then leave, new students would come in, new customers would come in, and business would often extend past the mid-evening hours, past midnight, and to hours as late as 4 a.m. until when they would finally close. I can neither confirm nor deny that I was one of those 4 a.m. customers here at Paisan's many a time. But it takes a massive impact to the bottom line when they had to change their hours to 8 p.m. Those are, if you add it up, 8 hours in total of business that gets lost when you change your closing time from 4 a.m. to 8 p.m. On top of the economic impacts are also the crime and public safety impacts. Frank, the owner here, speaks of how, in many respects, COVID, the pandemic, the lockdown, and then the period after it ended up resulting in higher crime in this area. He speaks of shootings that took place, in some respects fatal. We've seen reporting on the looting that would take place. It's just a different style of emboldened customer who feels like they're in charge of these streets. And quite frankly, the people who should be in charge of every single New York street in the state is the law-abiding citizen. Every street, everywhere. So last Friday, 1 week ago today, I was at the 176th Street subway station in the Bronx, in a place called Morris Heights. The night before, there was a fatal stabbing. It was the 4th knife attack in 10 hours down there. And there was a guy at our press conference who was paying attention. He seemed to be focused, interested in what we had to say, and a bunch of the media cameras caught me interacting with him for a bit afterwards. I went out to him, shook his hand to say hello, and he said that essentially they've given up in that area on government being involved at all in helping with regards to public safety. What he said was that if you want to fight me, you just let me know the time and the place, you bring your knife, I'll bring my knife, and we'll just settle it amongst ourselves. He seemed like a guy who, by the way, has actually done this before. He just looked like someone who had some experience actually being in a whole lot of fights, living life on the street. But it was still very shocking to hear him talk about it. Over the course of the last 2 weeks or so, we've seen these stories across New York. Now, inside of New York City, a lot of the crime that takes place receives the most amount of attention. You have a big media market that's there. These stories often go national. We had an issue, though, 2 weekends ago where a dad from Long Island whose kid goes to Marist visiting for Parents' Weekend was getting a cup of coffee, was checking out. Gunfire erupted. He ended up being fatally murdered, fatally shot. And now that family, instead of being able to celebrate a beautiful, amazing, important time in a life for a kid who's now in college, instead mourning the loss of their loved one. A week ago Wednesday, there was a mother of 3 just outside of the Buffalo area who was murdered in front of her 3 kids by her husband. The day before, on Tuesday, the husband was released by the judge after being charged with a slew of domestic violence offenses. The mother was begging not to let her husband out. She was insisting, he is going to kill me. On Tuesday he got released. The next day on Wednesday, a week ago Wednesday, 9 days ago, she was murdered in front of her 3 kids. She was wearing a bulletproof vest. Even at my own home, this past Sunday, my daughters were sitting at a kitchen table. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon when my house became the site of a gang-related drive-by shooting. My wife and I were in the Bronx. We just left the Morris Park Columbus Day Parade when we got a frantic call from Michaela. They heard the gunshots go out around them. Then they heard the screaming, and what was most traumatizing for them was that they thought that they were being targeted. These 16-year-old girls responded swiftly. They went upstairs. They locked themselves in the bathroom. Ariana called 911 while Michaela called my wife and I. We got home as quickly as we could. One bullet was found 30 feet away from where the girls were sitting. There were 2 people shot, lying on the ground about 10 feet from where my daughters were sitting. One was under my front porch. The other one was a couple feet away underneath a bush in front of my front porch. These stories, from Pine Hills to Marist to Erie County to Suffolk County, over the course of just the last couple weeks, as you look elsewhere around the rest of the state, you can add now to it everything that you are reading, you're seeing about what's happening in New York City. And clearly, there's an urgent need for state government to be doing more to keep our state safe. We should not be passing any more pro-criminal laws. We need to be rolling back some of the pro-criminal laws that have already been passed. We have to take back our streets. Paisan's Pizza has been open for 30 years. They should be open for 50 years. They should be open for 100 years. And the decision of whether or not Frank is keeping his business open shouldn't be based on whether or not he and his customers are fearing for their safety. And if the economic decision is being made where they feel like they should be open until midnight or 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 a.m., and all the business that can be made between 8 p.m. and 4 a.m., the impacts end up having all sorts of other consequences in crushing the American dream. For Frank's family, the American dream has been a New York dream. Coming here as a first-generation immigrant, as modest as it gets, humble upbringing, hard work paying off to success, a great business that's well known and respected here in the community, and well known far beyond the Albany community, is now another business that's thinking about shuttering their doors, and they're not alone. I've called on the governor of New York throughout this entire campaign to take action. I've said that we should repeal cashless bail and give judges discretion to weigh dangerousness. Kathy Hochul says we need more data. Go ask those 3 kids who are going to grow up without a mother about whether or not there's data. If the judge had discretion to weigh dangerousness and kept Kiera Hudson's husband locked up on Tuesday, Kiera Hudson would have been murdered on Wednesday. But beyond that, she says you have to elect her to find out what her position on it may be in January. I said that we should remove district attorneys who refuse to enforce the law. When I was talking about how we should be stepping up and holding Alvin Bragg accountable, she said he just got there, cut him some slack, he's doing his job. I believe that we need to repeal cashless bail and give judges discretion to weigh dangerousness. We need to amend the raise the age law. We have issues with less is more that need to be changed. The discovery law changes that have been made. Less is more resulted in that Howard Beach subway station victim, now battling for her eyesight, attacked just about 2.5 weeks or so ago by someone who had once killed his own grandparent, released on parole. The parole officer this past August, when he violated his parole, was not able to keep him detained. And that's what's been at least reported in that story. So what we need to see is action. Whether you're the governor of the state of New York, you're in the state legislature, what are you going to do to keep the people of New York safe? I don't care how many inside baseball conversations someone might get asked about mechanics and excuses. Whatever your excuse is, what are you going to do to keep the people of New York safe? And right now, the people who are in charge feel like they haven't actually done enough to pass pro-criminal laws. We're joined here by a number of elected officials and candidates. I'd like to introduce Jake Ashby. Jake is a New York State Assemblyman. Jake was actually the person who had reached out to me to mention that Frank and Paisan's were seriously thinking about shutting its doors due to rising crime here in Pine Hills. I appreciate Jake for reaching out. I want to introduce him, and Jake's running for New York State Senate.
Well, good morning still. It's a beautiful day, but it's in stark contrast to the economic climate that we all find ourselves in, and largely that's driven in part by crime for the case of Frank and his family business. And what an amazing story you hear today about, a family struggling. It's an American story. It's an American success story that's now being threatened by leaders who won't work together. Time after time, we've seen this over the course of the past few years, where one party has passed bills and policy that are in need of revision. We've seen it on the floor of the legislature, debated it over and over again, and then see these problems arise, and then wait for the opportunity to go back and amend them. But at what cost? At the cost of a family legacy? At the cost of the American dream? It's unacceptable. And that's why we need to elect leaders who are willing to go back and not only work together, but have the humility and the courage to make changes when necessary. And that's why I'm running for state senate, because I think we need balance back in the state legislature. And that's why I'm supporting Lee Zeldin and the candidates behind me. Thank you.
Ms. Joy is running for the United States House of Representatives here in the area. And Liz, I'd like to invite you to say a few words.
Very much. I have to tell you that I'm a mother of 4 adult children, and I'm a grandmother. Been married 31 years to my husband, who practices medicine here in the Capital Region. And I have to tell you that there's a universal language among all moms and all dads. Doesn't matter where you live, Doesn't matter what your house is like, what your town is like. It's a universal language. That universal language is we want safety and security for our children and our grandchildren. The levels of crime, violent crime that we are experiencing in Albany, the capital region, Schenectady, the surrounding areas, it's out of control. This is not a Republican, Democrat problem. What we are seeing is a humanitarian crisis by people in leadership like Kathy Hochul and my opponent Paul Tonko, who represents the people in the capital region, who refuse to do anything about it. We hear them talking a lot about gun violence, but they're not doing anything to keep the violent criminals behind bars where they belong. And as a result, moms are being shot in front of their children while wearing bulletproof vests. Does this not shock you? It makes me extremely passionate. It makes me feel so grieved as a mother that she went for help. The police knew they couldn't do anything more because of these disgusting, disgusting bills that refuse to give any judges judicial discretion. You imagine the trauma that's on these children? I know what it's like to be a victim of a violent crime in August of 2018 when I was just an innocent customer. I was a customer, broad daylight, when somebody came in to murder his estranged wife, who, by the way, violated a standing order of protection, who also, by the way, had paid bail. He was out on bail, but he had tried to kill her in June. But he was out 24 hours later. That murder attempt never would have happened had he been kept behind bars. And 1 year later, we have the bail reform, cashless bail, I call it catch and release, that was passed. Mothers, fathers, children, every age bracket, every economic bracket are being killed, murdered, attacked, stabbed. There's axes. It doesn't matter what kind of weapon. We have people that refuse to do anything about it. In Albany alone, violent crime has gone up 133%. And what do you get from your representatives? Well, we're working to fix it. No, they're not. No, they're not. And I speak for every mother, every father, it doesn't matter to me what political background they are. Safety and security so that the next generation coming behind us feels secure, that they can walk down the streets without worrying that their children might be stabbed, robbed, shot. And I will tell you something, all of you standing here today, because of the statistics that are increasingly rising with representatives in office, the Democrats that truly are doing nothing about it, your chances of being one of those victims increases every moment, every hour, every day, just like me, just like Lee Zeldin, 2 times now, his family and himself. At what point are people going to vote differently? At what point are they all going to stand up and say, for the sake of our cities, our towns, our businesses, our children, our parents and brothers and sisters, we're going to do something different. We're going to elect a Republican governor who knows what it's like, who's going to be protective. We're going to elect Rich Amador into the Senate, who's a former state trooper. We're going to elect Jake Ashby into the Senate, who served his country, my husband. I'm a veteran's wife. I'm a Blue Star mother. We have to have safety and security, or else we are not going to have a state, because people won't stay here, businesses will close, and more people will die. We can't afford it, and we have 25 days to get it fixed. We need to get Paul Tonko out of office and get courageous people in office who are willing to stand up and do what's right for everybody. Thank you.
Yes. Mayor Adams also calls it catch and release. And the other important thing to note with regards to New York's cashless bail law is that one of the conversations is about whether or not an offense is bail eligible. But what doesn't get enough attention is the fact that even when a charge is bail eligible, the way the law is written, that the judge needs to determine the least restrictive means to get the person to return to court. That is an assessment related more to flight risk and not as much with regards to danger. There was just a story that came out of Genesee County over the last few days. Somebody was charged with a slew of all different kinds of sex offenses, including first-degree rape. And even though the charges were bail eligible, the person ended up getting released. The assessment that's being made by the judge was what kind of bail needs to be set to make sure that they're returning to court. And that's the story that had come out of Genesee County in the last few days. And finally, Rich Amador. I grew up in a trooper household. My parents were divorced, remarried. I spent my week inside of one law enforcement household. I spent my weekend inside of another law enforcement household. And the New York State troopers were better served to have Rich, and the New York State Senate will be better served to have Rich in January. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, I served 31 years in the state police, and I felt blessed every day because I had the tools I needed to take care of my community. I worked in a small town, Greenville, south of here a little bit. 27 years I was in that station, and my wife says, you're not leaving until the kids graduate high school. But I had the tools I needed to make sure everything was good. I have a friend who's a landlord down here. This summer he's had to testify at 2 shooting trials. He showed me a video the other day from no further in the corner there, a guy shooting down the street, his gun jams, and he's clearing a malfunction. Now, as a firearms instructor, so I'm looking at the video a bunch of different ways. But that's horrible that a landlord just going to check on his property is testifying in these trials. And when he does testify, they're not going to go away. This is the big problem. Bail and discovery is horrible. Raise the age was probably worse. And I think in the city of Albany, that is the problem, because David Soares seems to be keying in on that. This raise the age legislation came around 16, 17, and it basically said we can't treat 16 to 17-year-old kids as offenders. So they won't lock them up, they won't put them in jail. Office of Children and Family Service has some serious problems, and they did some leadership changes, but the raise the age legislation got through, and it's been an absolute debacle. We need to go back to taking dangerous people off the streets. My wife was so appalled by the legislation, she actually left the agency and went to a different agency because she couldn't take it anymore. So please elect Lee, elect Jake, elect Liz. We need the tools. Law enforcement cannot do it. You can get every cop in the world right down here, but if they can't arrest these people and put them in jail, take them away for a while, it's not going to help. It's so important. Stop voting by party and start voting by common sense. Thank you very much. That's right.
In closing, and I look forward to answering anybody's questions. The first point is, and I spent 4 years in the state senate. We got 50 or so bills that I wrote through the finish line, passed by the Assembly and Senate, signed by the governor. Down in Washington, D.C., Georgetown University and the Lugar Center, they rank all 435 members of the House based on bipartisanship, the annual bipartisan index. The last year I was ranked 19, the year before that I was ranked 12. I want to work with the legislature in order to fix this. The people of New York want the legislature to work with the governor to fix this. This isn't about being a Republican, a Democrat, or an independent. This is not about being a liberal, a moderate, or a conservative. We are all here today in Pine Hills, in front of Paisan's Pizza, as New Yorkers, understanding that all across the entire state, there are other businesses that are thinking about folding or leaving. There are other families and individuals thinking about leaving. Their New York dream is ending. And we have to understand why that is. Why New York leads the entire nation in population loss. There should be a special session today to fix cashless bail. Even Mayor Adams calls for a special session right now to overhaul cashless bail and to amend raise the age. He's right. The Democratic mayor of New York City, I might be a Republican, he might be a Democrat. He's absolutely right. And the state legislature should do that right now. So call on the state legislature and governor to act between now and January. They can get this done on their own. They should do it in the coming days, not weeks or months. Come January, if nothing is done and we're sworn into office, I look forward to working with the legislature. But the laws on day one that we're talking about here are going to be suspended on day one. And when you sign it, it's a 30-day suspension. We're not talking about a repeal. But Castle-Spale, the Discovery Law changes, raise the age, less is more, the HALT Act, all 5 of these will all be suspended day one. I will declare a crime emergency in New York. There is a crime emergency in New York, and I will suspend these laws. But it's not because I don't want to work with the legislatures, because I want to force them to the table to work with New Yorkers who are demanding that they get to the table to actually fix this. I appreciate all of you being here. We all are here to stand with Frank, with the people of Pine Hills, the people of Albany. I look forward to working with the mayor of the city of Albany, work with the police chief, anyone else. Whoever is elected or appointed into these positions, we have to all, regardless of party or anything else, be willing to work with anyone to find common ground, however possible, and we have to make New York safe. Happy to answer any questions.
I have a question about your proposed executive order. I should know the answer to this, but 30 days you have the power to do. Could you extend it after 30
Yes.
days? But whether you agree with what you're doing, would be doing or not, wouldn't that be disruptive to the criminal justice system? Like, it would be very hard for them to just change in the middle.
I'm over 18 months into this campaign. I spend my time very much unlike Kathy Hochul spends hers. This is no rose garden strategy. You would have found me hours after a fatal stabbing in Morris Heights at the site of the stabbing. You know, the day after somebody gets released on Castle's bail, swinging an axe and smashing up tables and walls and swinging it at customers at a McDonald's on Delancey Street in Lower Manhattan, you know where to find me. I'll be standing right in front of the McDonald's on Delancey Street in Lower Manhattan. Time and again, we have felt that it's very important to be raising awareness to what is actually happening. And I get feedback from New Yorkers. New Yorkers are telling me that they want to overhaul cashless bail. I hear from corrections officers talking about the way that assaults on correctional officers and other prison staff and inmates have gone up since the April 1st implementation. You have the data. You see the numbers yourself about how it's gone up. The raise the age piece, now the intent's good. By the way, credit to anyone with the best of intent wanting to get raise the age passed, because they don't want to create a pipeline to prison. There's somebody finds himself on the wrong end of the law, they have a clean record, and you want to make sure that they're able to get their life back on track, and one offense doesn't end up derailing their entire pathway in life. But here's the problem with the implementation of it, is that you're seeing a whole bunch of these teenagers who are actually being used to commit more crimes. They're being used to commit crime after crime after crime because the case is going to go to family court and not criminal court. So when you dig into what these laws have actually resulted as a consequence, you know, less is more. Kathy Hochul signs it. She released 191 people from Rikers Island. A whole bunch of them within days, within the first couple of weeks, immediately got rearrested for additional offenses. Go talk to New Yorkers, and they want to see action. I am able to very safely and confidently guarantee for you that the people of New York absolutely want to see action taken to make life in New York safer. On streets, in subways, supporting men and women in law enforcement, ensuring that district attorneys across the state are all doing their job. So at this point, as far as what's disruptive to safety on our street, what's disruptive to the criminal justice system, are these laws that we are calling to be overhauled. What is disruptive to that family mourning the loss of their mother is that the judge the day before did not have the discretion to keep that husband behind bars, and the next day he was killed. What is disruptive for the woman who's battling for her eyesight, who got attacked at the Howard Beach subway station, is that when he violated his parole, the person who attacked her in August the reporting goes that he was not able to be detained by his parole officer. The laws are being disruptive to safety on our streets.
Congressman, what would you say to the many New Yorkers, from residents to business owners, who are thinking about moving, many of whom who have moved out of concerns for their own public safety? How would you address those concerns?
Well, listen, as far as why people are leaving the state, I believe that the reason why New York leads the entire nation in population loss is related to many different aspects of the breaking point, that consideration of whether or not to stay. As you all know, for months, I've been calling on Kathy Hochul to finish this sentence. New York leads the entire nation in population loss because I don't think she can complete the sentence. So you can't expect the governor of the state of New York to actually fix this. If you pose that question to her, by the way, she knows it's coming. I don't know how many of you were there in Binghamton when she was at the airport, and one reporter who was there actually asked her the question. You can ask her again. She knows it's coming. She knows I've been asking for it. I believe that New York leads the entire nation in population loss because New Yorkers are hitting their breaking point. They feel like their wallet, their safety, their freedom, some talk about the quality of their kids' education, are under attack. They look at other states like the Carolinas, Tennessee, Texas, Florida, and elsewhere, and they feel like their money will go further there, they will feel safer there, and they will live life freer there. That's how I would finish that sentence. That's what I believe. What does Kathy Hochul believe? Why isn't there a debate right now in the Capital Region? I don't care if one of you host it, all of you host it. I'll answer whatever questions you have, live or broadcast TV. Live, in a way where everyone all throughout the entire state can even watch live on their TVs. I don't care if it's a panel. I'll invite all. I'm accepting right now. You do it tonight. We'll do it next week. Everyone who's here, I'll stand in front of you live on TV, and you can ask me whatever question you want on any topic whatsoever. Nothing is off limits. Why? Out of respect for the New York voter. You have a job to do. You need to report on where we stand on as much information as you could possibly get from us. And I respect that. Kathy Hochul is trying to get away with just one debate at the very end of October, over a month after the start of absentee voting, for just 1 hour. There should be multiple debates across the state. I believe that that is important for the voters of New York. So, as you ask your question as far as why people are leaving, safety is a consideration. I'll say for businesses, a lot of them, it's economic considerations. The cost to do business. Go ask a farmer what the impact was of changing the overtime threshold. Go ask about the energy costs for a distributor and the amount of money that they spend each month on their freezer bill. And now ask the average individual about how much it's going to cost to be able to pay for their own electric bill. Now, if you go visit Ann's Pancakes on the Southern Tier with us a couple weeks ago, you would have found walking in that even though Ann's Pancakes was out of electricity, they had an outage when we showed up, that room of hungry patrons were all able to get fed because they operate their stoves on gas. So they were able to cook the food. There are people who run Albany who think that Ann's Pancakes shouldn't be able to access gas. So I really feel like it's important, beyond everything that we're talking about here on the crime, and I've outlined a lot of what my personal opinions are and what we need to do differently about it. To answer your question about businesses that are leaving, you have to really dig into the whole economic front. Having pro-business people running the state agencies, you have to bring down taxes across the board. You have to bring down costs to be able to operate and do business. Some of the regulations that get passed make it even harder. And New York is becoming less and less of a business-friendly state.
Thank you, Nick. Do you see a lot of these issues as being kind of statewide to a certain degree? I mean, you're from Long Island, the governor's from Western New York, but do you see a lot of these issues being ones that upstaters and downstaters can't agree with?
It kind of depends on what the issue is. I would say that I hear all across the state about cashless bail. I hear more about the HALT Act when I'm in an area where there's a prison nearby and there are correctional officers who work there. I may hear more about, raise the age in a particular urban setting where they have a larger issue, where a lot of these teenagers are being used to commit a lot of crimes. That's where we heard Rich Amador talking about it from a local perspective, from what he heard around here in the capital region. You've heard Mayor Adams talk about it from what's going on inside of New York City. So sometimes some of what we're talking about here is amplified more locally. As far as having debates in different parts of the state, I mean, talking about the overtime threshold is not as much an issue in New York City as it would be if you were to have a debate, somewhere near here. Talking about broadband is more of an issue if you were to have a debate, in the North Country or elsewhere around the state than if you were to have a debate inside of New York City. The conversation as far as extracting natural gas is very different if you're having a debate in Binghamton or Elmira than it would be if you're having a debate inside of New York City. So I would say even on all these other issues that we're not really necessarily here to talk about today, but they are relevant, so I'm glad that we, through Q&A that you're asking about it. Some of what we're talking about here, absolutely statewide issues, and others are regional.
But do you feel like upstate and downstate are demonstrably different from one another? Or do you think there's like a lot of commonality between voters right now?
Depends on the issue. As far as voters go, what's very interesting as I travel the state is that when I am in red counties and blue counties, when I'm talking to Republicans, Democrats, and independents, when I'm talking to liberals and moderates and conservatives, what's amazing, unlike any other time that I remember, is the alignment of how they're talking about their breaking point in the state. Everywhere I go throughout the day, I come across people who tell me, Lee, if you don't win, I'm leaving. There are people who are telling me about their family who have already left. At times I'm talking to someone who say, hey, listen, I'm just here visiting my family. I've actually already left. So I would say the most common theme right now across New York, to really get to the heart of what is on the mind of the New York resident, of the New York voter, is that there are, whatever the number is, it's got to be a record number of New Yorkers thinking about their own future in New York more so than they have in the past.
Congressman, you talked about your plan to declare a crime emergency, and that would allow you to take some unilateral action, but you also aired an ad yesterday that says you cannot and will not change abortion laws. What's the difference? Why should voters trust that you won't declare, say, an abortion?
Well, one is that I'm saying what I will do in declaring a crime emergency and suspending those laws, and then I'm also saying what I won't do. And the abortion law in New York, which was passed a few years ago, codified far more than Roe. When we woke up the day after the Dobbs decision, the law in New York was exactly the same as it was the day before. Nothing changed, and I'm not going to change it.
What
So
about
you're saying, just to clarify, you're saying right now you wouldn't issue an executive order if you were governor to change the abortion laws?
Correct.
Or temporarily.
Final question.
Correct.
Senator, I'm Nick with News.
I'll get you there.
Senator, I'm Nick with News 10. My question is, what would you do to help these businesses that don't feel safe? Follow up to that, if a business is adamant about leaving where they currently are, would you support them staying within the same area or within the same city, maybe just relocating to a different area where they feel more comfortable?
Entirely a decision that is up to that individual business. Some businesses have already decided to leave. There are other businesses elsewhere that have decided not to come to New York. There are businesses that might not feel safe in one area that may look to relocate to another area. That's a decision for the individual business. That's not a decision for the governor of the state of New York to tell Frank at Paisan's Pizzeria where he should move his business to. What I want is for Frank at Paisan's Pizzeria to be able to keep his business right here.
So what steps would you take to kind of help them with their decision?
Well, it's three-pronged. And we've spent a lot of time during today talking about the pro-criminal laws that have been passed that I believe we need massive overhauls to. We need to support our men and women in law enforcement, and we need our district attorneys doing their jobs. It's very different. A district attorney in New York City, in Manhattan, versus a district attorney in maybe some other state where they believe that DA stands for district attorney and not defense attorney. So not all DAs are equal. Not all local law enforcement are equal. But it's important for the state to be making the changes with regard to the pro-criminal laws that are absolutely resulting in rising crime and people feeling less safe. We need to support our law enforcement more, and we need DAs doing their job.
Congressman,
Final question.
Just wanted to follow up from the other week when asking about the absentee ballot case. Do you agree with state party leadership that the state's absentee ballot process is unconstitutional and it's the Democratic Party's attempt to cheat the system? And furthermore, if that case is still outstanding, have you made any thoughts about whether you'd accept the results of the election?
A few thoughts with regards to the absentee ballot process. One is I will be respecting whatever the courts decide in this case. Whether they go one way or the other, I would anticipate there may be appeals. You work through the process, a decision is made, and that decision will be final as it works through that process.
Congressman,
I don't believe that the state legislature at the start of this session should have passed a new law declaring that on November 8th, people will not be able to vote in person because of COVID. What would have been more responsible would have been waiting until the end of session in June, or maybe even a special session afterwards, as November is getting closer, to assess whether or not COVID should be a valid excuse. But essentially, what they decided way back at the very beginning of this year was way too early and highly suspicious for many New Yorkers. And then their suspicions ended up being confirmed when the New York State Democratic Party chose to mail out all across the entire state absentee ballot applications pre-filled where they're actually checking the box for COVID. I could do the same thing if I wanted to. I could mail out absentee ballot applications to New Yorkers all across the state, pre-filled out, checking the box for COVID. It probably would end up yielding me more votes. You know the reason why I didn't do it? Because I don't believe it's right. And I don't believe it was right for the Democratic Party to do so. Now, ultimately, as far as analyzing the law, the Constitution, it's good that there's a case before the courts to decide the issue, because this isn't just an issue about 2022. This is an issue about future emergencies going forward. What happens if there's another health emergency, there's a natural disaster, or there's something else where the people in government decide in January to add a whole new excuse? In New York, we don't have no excuse absentee balloting. As a matter of fact, the will of the New York voter, they voted on this last November, and they rejected a ballot proposal with regards to allowing no excuse absentee balloting. It was put out to the people, and they voted it down. So I think that this is an important decision for the courts to make, not just for 2022, but also for the future. As far as election integrity goes, to answer that part of the question, I don't care whether you're Republican, Democrat, I don't care whether your candidate is going to come in first or second, I don't care whether you're running for governor, state senate, state assembly. I think it's important for everyone, everywhere, to care about election integrity. I think that it's important that if you are an eligible voter, that you should be able to cast your vote and that vote should be counted. If you're not an eligible voter, you should not be able to have your vote counted. And everyone's votes should be counted once. One person, one vote. As far as protecting that process, if you're out there and you're listening and you want to be a poll watcher, sign up to be a poll watcher. I don't care, Republican, Democrat, whatever, participate in the process. When the ballots get open, you can be there to closely observe those ballots being opened. I want more people to participate in the process. And I want to ensure that it's easy to vote, hard to cheat.
Congressman, as you know, polls indicate that crime is one of the top 3 issues that's on the minds of New Yorkers. There's a crime you're not talking about, seditious conspiracy. I mean, the January 6th committee has revealed evidence that shows that Donald Trump is responsible for what happened at the Capitol on January 6th. And yet so many Republicans seem reluctant or afraid to talk about it, to condemn Donald Trump. Why is that?
Well, so I'm running for governor of the state of New York, and as I travel around the state, New Yorkers are telling me that They want me focusing on the issues that are related to them and their families. They're thinking about their own breaking point in the state. I assure you that as I travel around the state and I'm asking, what's on your mind? What's going to decide your vote for governor? At no point am I coming across people say, what will decide my vote for governor is based off of who the last president was. It doesn't happen. And by the way, it happens across the country less and less right after a new president's sworn in. So here's the thing, we're not normal people. You know, here in this room, we pay attention to everything. There are average people who are out doing their jobs, they care about their family, and this wild thing, you might not even believe that this is even possible. This is what happens for the average New Yorker and the average American. When a new president is sworn in, the person who's sworn in becomes the new president. And the person who was the president becomes the former president. And then life moves on. So if you wanted to get to the heart of what the top 3 issues are, if you want to get to the issues of what the top 20 issues are, if you want to just have a person on the street experience, walk through the streets of Pine Hills and say, hey, listen, I was just with Lee Zeldin. He's running for governor of the state of New York. What do you want to see him do? What do you want to see him focus on? I would take a $5 bill out of my pocket. I'll take I don't have a $100 bill in my pocket, but if I did, I would give you 100 to 1 odds that if we took a field trip around this street and you asked people, what do you want Lee Zeldin focused on? He's running for governor. I guarantee you that it's going to be focused on crime, the economy. It's going to be about their kids' education. It's going to be about freedom. It's going to be about their breaking point, their future in the state. Go ahead and ask Frank.
So what happened on January 6th shouldn't matter.
That's not. What I'm saying is.
Running for governor of New York State and stopping by today for a slice. We check in live with how Lee Zeldin's visit is connected to recent violence in Albany. Plus, 13 investigates the disease that steals a person's memory. The half-hour special report. This is how Alzheimer's looks coming up. And the ending of the week on a beautiful
crime issues. They might talk to you about cashless bail. Again, I'll give you 100,000 to 1 odds. That what I'm saying is what will happen if you took a field trip on Pine Hills before someone will tell you the crime that I'm focused on is, the crime of sedition. I've been in this campaign for over 18 months, and that hasn't happened to me yet. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks for rolling on that.
President Trump at the January 6th committee was
I'm sorry.
laughter stock at the spectacle that they made about the committee was referring to that.
I just got to ask the question. So you have to